If you want to live a happy and fulfilled life, you need to know your top 10 values. And what do I mean by values? I mean knowing the core pillars in your life that makes you feel fulfilled. And these core pillars are just like the foundation of a building or of a house if you think about it. And they are authentic to you in the sense that it comes naturally to you. And you don't need to force these values, but then it's just like there, It's just present in your life when you're living from your higher self. A really good analogy for this is that eventually in the future, when you move out from high school and graduate to college, you'll probably be at one point looking to buy a house, buy a house that you want to live in. And your core value, in a sense, is like having a general broad framework of knowing what type of house you're looking for. Like, do you want to live in a house that has one of those triangular roofs? Or do you want to live in one of those houses where it's just a flat roof? And do you generally want more bedrooms or, bigger rooms or less rooms? And maybe you want a backyard or a balcony or a room dedicated for studying. And how do you want the interior of your house to be generally designed? Like, do you want to have a simple design or maybe something more complex with all of these like fancy lightings, but then it gives you a more elegant vibe? And this, in the sense, is what your top values are going to tell you, right? It's going to give you a customized blueprint for you to follow. So then you know which areas in your life you want to navigate towards and really focus your effort in, rather than blindly doing activities that you find meaningless. Wouldn't it be cool if you just knew which 10 things you need to be looking at when you approach adulthood? Like, just take a moment to think about the people around you that you walk past every single day on your way to school or on your way to work. Like, what kind of feeling did they really give you if you seriously think about it? Like, pay attention to their presence, right? And most of the time what you'll see is that a lot of people give us this feeling of feeling depressed, feeling lost, feeling upset. Or maybe you see someone rushing down the streets because they're fearing something, right? They're fearing that they're going to be late, or they're fearing that this is going to happen. Or maybe you see people who are emotionless on the street. And really just take a second to think about how you will feel if that was you 20, 30, or 40 years down the line. You're that person walking down the street with a straight face. No energy inside of you because you've got a job and a career that, pays you maybe okay money. And you just do all the basics. You're able to feed your family. You don't have to worry about things. But then there's just not a spark. You just feel like you're living a mundane life with no greater purpose. Do you really want your life to be like that? I assume if you're watching this video, and if you've been watching some of my previous videos already for quite a while, you're probably like me, We're trying to seek something greater in life, trying to build a life with meaning and with purpose. A life where we're able to wake up every single day in the morning and really jump out of bed feeling excited. Like, really picture that feeling and visualize it for a second. This is a life where you're going to be the driver of your life. You're going to have control of where you want to go rather than being told what you want to do. And even though there may be things where you can't control because you realize that that may be the true nature of you, at least you'll be able to accept them rather than go in the opposite direction, which many people does. This is a life where you ascend below your low conscious values to really living in your higher self with your higher conscious values. And I'm not going to repeat myself again because in the previous video, I've already explained the difference between low conscious values and high conscious values. So I'll link that video in the description if you want to take a look at that before getting into the values exercise. But it's time to wake up, right? It's time to wake up. And it's time to start paying more attention in discovering who you are and really remembering who this true self is, because You have one life. I have one life. Everyone has one life. And what you realize is that time flies by super quickly. In a glimpse of an eye, you're out of high school. You're out of college, and you're really entering real adulthood. And for some of you who's already out of college, you probably know what I'm talking about when you look back at how fast your childhood really zoomed by. So let's lock in, okay? From this moment onwards, let's actually lock in. Let's actually start taking this one life, this miracle life that you have, and really maximizing and squeezing all of the juice that you can get with it. And if you're still pretty young like me, or if you're people, watching below their 30s, or, whoever's watching, you're not too late. You're here at the perfect time, watching the video that you need to be watching to get you to actually get started to living this meaningful life. A life that is aligned to your life purpose. So the objective of this video is to help you find your top 10 values. And previously, you'll see that I've covered a lot of conceptual-based videos on life purpose and higher self. But this video, I'm going to be focusing more on the implementation parts of actually finding your life values. So we're going to be putting all of that abstract stuff that we've covered previously and really drilling it into more practical, right? Actually finding out what your values are and going deeper into them and aligning them with a few categories, which you'll see in the following few minutes here. So why are values important? Well, number one, your happiness is determined by values. And that's different for everyone, and no one has the same set of values, which you'll start to realize. And the reason why we need these values is because most of us think that happiness is something abstract, And what ends up happening is that because we think that it's abstract, we don't really pinpoint it down to something, right? We just let it come and go. And, it's just really something that is temporary. We don't think that happiness can be something that is dragged out for a certain period of time in our life. But that's incorrect, because once we find our values, you'll be able to realize what gives you joy in your life. And ultimately, values define your authentic self. And what authentic self means is really the true nature of who you are, right? Not the mask that you're wearing in public, but really the person you are on the inside. When you take actions with your top 10 values, what you'll start to notice is that your actions can seem effortless at times, and sometimes you'll start to question yourself on whether or not this is too easy for me, right? It's so easy to get into the flow state when you do these things. For example, when I'm recording these videos, like a lot of the time I will start to see that a lot of the things just comes naturally to me, like when I'm talking about these concepts, things just comes in. It's like an automatic download from somewhere, right? And you start to realize how beautiful this gift is when you can share with others. Having your set of top 10 values will also make it easier for you to face tough decisions. Like, for example, like a lot of the time, we're really fearful and we're really irrational, when it comes to making big decisions in our lives. Like if you want to start this business or start that business, or, for me, if it's going to this college, going to that college, when you get all of your acceptance letters coming through and you start to be like, oh my days, I have so many options. Which one should I take? And you start to panic, right? But then once you have these values to really ground you in the moment, to ground you in which direction, which path you should take in life, then it'll be much easier to make decisions rather than having to make them based on fears and really based on that moment, based on that emotional wave that you have, right? Another one is relationships, right? A lot of the time you'll see people around us get into relationships in a really rushed manner, in a manner where both individuals are dependent of each other because they're lacking one aspect, right? They don't love themselves in one aspect. That's why they're finding love from elsewhere. They're finding validation. But once you start realizing what your values are, then you'll be able to make better decisions, right? More informed decisions that actually aligns with what you want in a relationship or whatever you're looking for in life. Your top 10 values eventually will be how you also prioritize different things in life. And more specifically, in that list of 10 values, what you'll see is that the top 3 values on your list, after you rank them, based on which one gives you the most joy, will point us in a loose way in what your life purpose will be. And it will tell us the basic domain of where you should be looking at, because these are your core values. So ideally, you will want to be spending more time contemplating on those top 3 values because you know that they're more important to you, right? They're going to be critical in your life compared to the other values. Another aspect with values is that it will help make goal setting way easier. Just think back to the time when you're setting this goal and you're setting that goal and you start to realize, oh wait, that actually wasn't what I wanted at the end. Like, for example, you hit some kind of milestone. Let's just say you start benching like 200 pounds in the gym, right? And once you get there, once you hit that goal, let's just say 6 months or a year later, you start to realize, wait, even though that was my goal, I didn't get that certain feeling that once, right? I didn't get that certain satisfaction. So maybe your goal is actually wrong, or your goal was actually not directly pinpointed into that specific area that you're actually wanting in life. And one of the secrets in life is to stop doing things that doesn't make us happy. When I said that, it sounds so simple, right? But the problem is that a lot of us, we're confused about what makes us happy, or we're so vague about it to the point where we're unable to just be happy in the moment. And we haven't articulated it. So this process that we're going to go through will articulate what these happiness pillars are specifically for you in your life. So what exactly are values and how would they look like? Your top 10 values will be a list of 10 different words. And value is just a label. It points specifically to something. And each value will have its own definition, which I'll give you some examples later on. And it's something within you that you find most meaningful out of. So for example, you can have the value of family. You really value family for a particular reason. And other values are, you can have the value of adventure, the value of nature, or the value of humor, or the value of productivity, or socializing, right? You really value being in these environments where you talk to different people. And in summary, values are things that you find most meaningful in life. So pursuing these things will make you happy, and it's as simple as that. These values drive your higher and lower self. And your higher self probably got you to listen to this video because you want more in life, right? You're seeking for greater fulfillment. Well, that's what we want to understand, because we want to replicate this momentum, right? We want to replicate what this higher self is fueled by. And just to give you some perspective, I've gone through this process nearly a year ago, and I'm still learning new things day after contemplation and doing this experience, and the list really grows over time. But then even though it's growing and changing all the time, what I've found is that having this list of values, right, this list of values that represents you as a person right now, gives you at least a starting roadmap to which directions you look at, because a lot of people, they don't even know where to get started, right? So that's what we're going to help you to do. So one more thing before we get straight into deriving these values is I just want to give you a few warnings or some few misconceptions that people have when they start thinking about values. When it comes to talking about values, we're not talking about things that you wish to value. You see this person over there doing really well, so then you want to value that as well. And maybe you're trying to value family because of social pressure, right? That's not what we want to be generating for our top 10 list. What we want to be finding is what comes naturally to you, Like what is authentically inside of you. And these are the values that will dictate long-term fulfillment and really true joy in your life. And another thing with values is that we're not only trying to find the values that you're aligned with right now, because most of the time what you'll see is a lot of people, they've been living out of their values and living unaligned with their values, which is causing them to be depressed and causing them to suppress all of their values on the inside. But then what we want to do is rediscover these values so then you can start, changing your path or adjusting it so then you're more aligned to living in more joyful ways. So even though sometimes you would, fall out of integrity with these values, it is still an authentic value if it gives you deep joy in the long run. And what you start to realize is that there's also two types of values. We have the positive values, which are values that we want to move towards, and we have negative values, which are values we want to move away. Negative values are basically values that you're negatively motivated by, that's pushing you towards that value. So for example, if we use that family as an example, maybe you value family because of social pressure, because other people are pressuring you to start a family because everyone else is doing it. So then because you feel guilty for not having a family right now or not being in a relationship, that's why you're motivated to pursue this value. And that right there is negative value, right? These values are conditioned into you. They're conditioned into you so then you can avoid the pain and avoid the suffering of other people judging you. Compared to more of a positive lens, if you have a positively motivated value of family in your list, then maybe you're someone who actually loves being around your family, right? You actually get this deep sense of joy when you see their smiles on their faces, or when they're around you, you feel peaceful and it gives you energy, right? That is a positive value right there that we want to keep in our list and continue replicating and continue producing in your life. So during this process, if you start to realize that you have some negative values coming up, you really don't have to worry, because what we'll actually do also later on is that we'll also work through these values, right? So just write them down first, and we'll really help you reprogram and really deeply analyze why this value is there. And it's very important to also be self-honest in this process, because it is very, very, very easy for you to deceive yourself, to sway yourself, and have your lower self come through when it comes to doing this exercise. And really, if you're generating this list of values that are not authentic to you and you're just doing it for the sake of doing it, then there's no point of doing the exercise in the first place. So just watch yourself put on some kind of filter, right? Because the mind is a really tricky mechanism where it can easily fool you into thinking that you're this, but then you're actually not. All right, so jumping straight into the first exercise, super excited. Below this video, in the description, you'll find 2 PDF files that I've attached, which are links to the worksheets, which I'm going to run through in these next few videos. One of the PDFs that you'll see contains this comprehensive list of values that I've curated from multiple different sources, such as you're learning about different well-known and successful individuals and analyzing them, and then also gathering different people's lists of values and really combining it and synthesizing it to one neat list so then you can use it. And then for the other PDF, you'll see this is a master document which you're going to be filling out and refining as we go through all of these different exercises. So just make a copy of it and save it somewhere safe in your desktop or your drive or whatever. So speaking more about this list of values that you'll cross-reference to, this is actually a list that I've used for myself when I was doing this process. I think first time I was doing it was around a year ago now. And I've also used this list of values to help my friends find their values and help people figure out their values together. And these values that you'll see here are representative of some possible values that human beings can have. And the reason why I selected these particular values when there's like infinite values is because I think that a lot of people value these things commonly. So most likely you're going to be able to find something that you value there as well. So the purpose of this exercise is to give you some idea of where to get started, because most likely there are things and moments that you forgot about in your life which is authentic to you, but then you just don't have the time, or you just haven't considered this aspect in your life, when in reality those are things that you value as well. So what you're going to do with this list of values that you see is that you're going to take your time to really go through that list one by one, and then think about the definition of each value and what it means for you in your life. And what you're going to do is you're going to pick 10 values from the list. Not more than 10, not less than 10, but choosing 10. One great challenge that you're going to have when you look through this list of values is you're going to have more than 10 values. But then really limit yourself to 10 values, because that's the whole point of the exercise, which is to hone yourself down and pinpoint what the most essential values to you in life are. Because if you think about it like a buffet, right? You have a buffet of values here. But then you realize that your body is only able to take in so much food before you vomit it out, right? Or before you overload. So then what you have to do is carefully pick the type of food or pick the values that you want to start living aligned with it, to put into your body. When you look at the values as well, it's also super easy to get lost. So I want you to ask the question, which of these values is most meaningful and would make me most fulfilled to embody? So when you go through that list, ask yourself that question. And I can repeat it one more time. Which of these values is most meaningful and would make me most fulfilled to embody? And when you go through that list, if there are any values that I did not mention in that list, but it deeply resonates with you, I want you to go ahead with that one, right? Because the main reason why I put that list of values is for the people who have completely no idea where to get started, which was me in the beginning. So then you can also refer to something that you can work with. And then after that, you can expand over time with more specific values once you do more of these exercises and you start contemplating more about your life and being aware of what makes you feel joyful. After generating these 10 values from your list, it should feel like these are the 10 pillars that you're going to design and build your life on. Like genuinely, these are values that are you, right? These are values that belongs to Bosco. These are values that belong to you. And it's also very important to note that these values are just labels. And these values can have very different connotations, very different meanings, right? You can have the dictionary meaning, and you can have the cultural meaning, or the positive or negative meaning. But what's important with that is what the word means to you. Not what the word means for other people, but what it actually means for you, right? What does this specific value mean? What does family mean to you? Or what does adventure mean to you? Or what does freedom mean to you? Another strategy, if you're having a hard time to hone in on your 10 values from the list, is to highlight and combine the like terms that represent similar meaning for you. And then afterwards, what you want to do after you have this whole group of values is give a heading label for the group, which you feel like is a good representation term that overarches the entire group, that umbrellas all of the different terms. For example, let's say I feel like the values of truth, honesty, transparency, wisdom, sincerity, integrity, realness. I feel like all of these values give me the same kind of fulfillment. You know, it makes me feel principled. It makes me feel elegant. But then I personally feel like wisdom speaks the most to me, since I think wisdom is something like combining all of my past mistakes and learning from it, and, you know, making wise choices and being original, being authentic from it. Then what you'll pick for this value is wisdom. And what you'll see is I've created a separate tab on the worksheet, which gives you a space to cut and paste different values and label an overarching term. So feel free to use that to your advantage if you're feeling stuck with pinpointing a specific value. What I've seen work really well as well is as you go through that list of values, you can use different color highlighters to help you mark down what feels similar to you. And then afterwards, you can do the grouping together however you like, or like play around with the order and things like that. Another useful tool that I've found really helpful during this process is using AI. And what do I mean by using AI? I mean using AI to help you express the feelings that you may have on the inside, which may be hard for you to put in words during that moment. But then you know that something is going on there. And let me quickly switch over to my computer so then I can show you exactly what I mean. Alright guys, so I'm currently on Qwen, and feel free to use whatever AI you like. Personally, I just like using Qwen. And what you want to do is paste in the prompt, which I will link in the description. And you're just going to customize this part. So we're just reading it out. I'm in the process of figuring out my top 10 values right now. And one thing that I've been stuck on is trying to figure out the overarching value that I have between two activities that gives me a similar feeling of fulfillment whenever I do them. So you just straight up tell the AI what you're trying to do, and then describing these two activities. And we're going to be filling this out. Could you give me some suggested ideas on potential values? And maybe I should say value keywords for the overarching theme. So what should we use as the activity? So let's just say, for example, for me, I feel like going to church and singing in church and singing in football and, like being in this whole unified space just somehow gives a similar value. But I don't exactly know what the value is. So I will just start describing these two activities. So, activity one, singing in church. I feel my heart pound a lot. The music, especially the piano, makes me feel super energetic on the inside. I get shivers. What you want to do is just use your 5 senses, right? Describe it as detailed as you can. Just start thinking about it. What else? I feel especially proud when I look at the people around me singing in unity. And let's just say that's what I have for now. And then activity 2 is singing football team anthem when watching my favorite football club play. What happens? Let's think. Maybe it's like the loud roars and chanting makes me feel unified, together, fighting for something greater. And you can see I've already repeated the word unity, right? So maybe unity is one of your values. And this is one of the good things with this exercise is that once you just start thinking about it, then a lot of the times when you describe things, it will automatically come, right? Like the value may just suddenly appear for you unconsciously. So what we want to do is just put it down somewhere so then we can start identifying them. What else? I really like the heat in the environment when people are doing the wave. It gives me lots of energy. So you just want to keep writing, right? Like right now I'm still stuck on a bit of ideas, but then you get what I mean, right? You just have to just rethink and relive that moment and then just start describing it. So let's see what AI gives us for now, right? Even though this is some really light description. Yeah, so just starting to read this, we can see collective effervescence. I have no clue what that word is. Unified purpose, sacred synchronicity. So you can see these are kind of what we're looking for, but then the language is not accessible. So what you'll want to do is tell the AI to please make these more accessible language using G10 ESL language. And why G10 is because I just found that when you say G10 ESL, it kind of gives the AI like exactly what you're looking for, and it's really accessible with the language. Tribe is a good one. Or maybe one of your values are tribe, but then you want to be more specific with it. Together energy. One voice. Group fire. Yeah, so definitely play around with it, right? This is just really the beginning, but then you can continue refining the AI and giving it more ideas. So then you yourself can also come up with interesting stuff that you can think that might match one of your values. So I think this is just another really good way for you to brainstorm and come up with ideas for potential values on your top 10 list. So now once you have your top 10 values honed in, we need to articulate clearly what each one of these words on your list actually means for you. What we need to do is get a concise definition from you. And if that requires you typing out a big chunk of paragraph on what that actually means to you, then go for it. And what we'll do afterwards is hone it down to a maximum of 15 to 20 words. And another really helpful tool again is using AI. Like once you start having all of these brain dumps on what that definition actually means to you, you can tell AI to help you synthesize it to 15 to 20 words. So then you can clearly articulate what the value means to you. Some key questions that you want to be asking in this process is, number one, what exactly does this value mean to me? right? Specifically and concretely, what exactly are you talking about in that value? Number 2, what would it look like tangibly? And tangibly just means what will it actually look like in practical terms? Right? For example, if I have the value of physical exercise, what does the value of physical exercise mean in real life? Right? And the value of exercise might mean I have to swim every single day in the morning for 30 minutes. That's tangible, right? That's practical. Because if you just say your value is physical exercise and you're going to go swimming, that's so broad because you're not giving yourself the exact timeline of how much you have to swim, right? Of the specific details that will make you feel joyful. And number 3, how will I know if I embody this value? And what these values are supposed to do is supposed to give you a better sense of what actually makes you happy, right? It gives you practical things that you can act upon, you can take action on, so then you can continue replicating that in your life. So let me give you another good example of what I mean by specific. For example, if I have the value of adventure, what I might say for my definition is I want to travel at least once during the summer. That's very specific. And even more specifically, I want to go to Southeast Asian countries. Right? That's going to give me a lot of joy because I really like the monasteries there. I really like learning about the cultures there and visiting different museums. And I want to also visit this specific restaurant with my boyfriend and with my girlfriend. And I want to also go hiking. And I want to also go hang gliding. Where that right there is a very good example of what it means to be tangible and what it means to be specific, giving you the nutty, gritty details. So on the flip side, what a bad example would look like is if you just say adventure is doing cool stuff, doing risky things. Because what does it mean to do cool things? Right? Cool things might mean to you, jumping off a mountain. Right? That might be cool for someone, but it might not be cool for other people. And what you can do in the process is, once you have these definitions down, you can really take a bird's eye view and see if there are any identical lists of the value definitions. Because what you might actually discover is there might be repeated values in your list. So what you want to do is combine both of them together and synchronize it to one really beautiful word that can represent that value, and then use that as one of your top 10 values. And then what's going to happen is you're going to have a free slot, right? You're going to have an extra slot because you combine two values into one. And what you want to do is just repeat that process again, right? Go back to the list and then pick another value, right? Pick another thing that gives you joy in a different way. So let me now run through some personal examples of some of my values and how I'm defining these values. And one of my values is personal growth. So when I ask the question, what does personal growth mean to me, right? What does personal growth really mean to me? I start to think about it and I'm like, an area of personal growth is having routines and having systems and having habits which can help me create compounding effects on my work. And then over time, I realize I'm making progress, and progress is something that I really value. And this value of personal growth also means being patient with decisions, right? Waiting when it's not the right time to do things, and acting when it's the right time to do things. And another aspect of personal growth is this concept of advancing, evolving my craft and really revising it to the point where I become a master in something. And also always revising and sticking with the basics from time to time. Because I really believe that there's going to be true wisdoms that I gain from those basics. So the next question is, what will personal growth look like tangibly? Right? So specifically, what actions do I need to take to show this value of personal growth in my life? Following my calendar, right? That's a huge one. Because when I follow my calendar, I realize how much I've grown over time and I'm able to keep up with these routines. Being courageous and taking bold action, right? And learning through reading, watching inspiring media such as these spiritual channels on YouTube, or these things on self-improvement, or chatting with leaders in the field. And more specifically, I want to chat with at least one spiritual leader or one leader that I'm inspired to learn more about every single week. That right there is tangible. That right there is things that you can achieve and that you can accomplish and that you can measure. So now, how will I know if I embody this value of personal growth? I think most fundamentally, I will know that I embody this value during my weekly and quarterly review session. Because once I look back at my calendar and see how much progress I've made, then that validates that I followed my values. So that right there was just a run through of what I will do for each of the values and what you should also be doing. So let's now also do another example, right? Let's just say another one of my values are intimacy. So what does intimacy really mean to me? I think one huge aspect of intimacy is connecting with people on a soul level, right? I really like deep connections rather than having shallow connections. So that's one of the core values that I have with intimacy. And another area of intimacy is having mutual acknowledgement, right? So being interdependent in my relationship. But then when I come together with that person, no matter if it's romantically or if it's like doing a project, we can really connect on a deep emotional level. So what would that look like tangibly? Right? Tangibly, it looks like having one-on-one conversations or having smaller group conversations on deep topics such as, vulnerabilities and things on life and what's been going on. And also being an attentive listener on my side and being fully present in the moment. And when it comes to romantic aspects of intimacy, this also means physical intimacy, right? Deep physical intimacy where we're creating love together. Or that's what intimacy looks like tangibly to me. And then finally, how will I know if I embody intimacy? And then I start thinking about that. I know I embody intimacy if I realize that long chunks of time pass by. Because what I realize is when I have intimate conversations, it just feels like, just minutes pass by. But then when I look back at the clock, hours actually slip by without both of us knowing. So that is one way to realize how intimacy comes up in your life. So now that I've ran through these two exercises with you, the first one being looking at this list of values and determining what your top 10 values are, and then the second one is giving specific definitions that are tangible to those values. What I want you to do, if you haven't already, is download a copy of the document attached in the description and really block out a good 1 hour, right? At least a good 1 hour to run through this activity. Because where the value comes in this activity is when you get into that deep state of contemplation and really start looking back and start thinking about what those values are. And what you'll see is that these values is like giving you a life compass, right? These values are going to be the things that gives you this internal grounding and allows you to start living from your life purpose and start living from your higher self. And if you really see the value of this activity, then 1 hour really will not be a huge thing with this exercise, which you're investing in, because if you compare that to other things that you're doing in your life, like what's really more important, right? Is it more important to, let's just say, spend an hour, like chatting with your friends, or spend an hour less doing this compared to using that hour to find out what gives you the joy, right? What brings you deep fulfillment so then you can start doing more of those activities for the rest of your life. Like, we think about comparing those two things, which one is more valuable to you? In the long run, which one brings you deeper fulfillment? Should be pretty obvious. And what you'll see is that on that document that I've created, there's also several other columns there on the right side. But then for now, what I want you to focus on filling is the first two columns. Is what's going to happen is in the next few videos, we're going to run through these columns, and ideally, what you'll want to do between these videos is really just block out some time so then you can actually do the exercise, right? Rather than just listening to this and not taking action. Because after taking action, then you'll start to see the transformation, right? The transformation does not come from me telling you about these concepts, right? The transformation comes when you put in the practice and actually find the values in your life so then you can start taking the correct action from there. And finally, I just want to emphasize, again, how it's so important to spend the time, right? It's definitely worth spending the time. Just having this like float in your head whenever you're doing something else doesn't really matter. But over time, you want to be generating high quality answers because we want to build a high quality life, right? So just bookmark the doc, do whatever you need to do in between. Like, you don't have to do this for like days in a row, but then you can just have this hanging there. Like, for example, after one session, you finish filling this, and then you're maybe stuck on this specific value, and you're maybe not that clear with whether or not this is a value for you. What you can do is you can just leave that in the back of your mind, and then over time, just start tapping into your feelings. Like, do you feel like this is part of your values, or do you feel like it's not? So yeah, just have some fun with this exercise, right? It really is an amazing process when you start to discover yourself and you start to uncover these hidden gems, really, that gives you the deep fulfillment and the deep energy and the craziness in your life. And I'm looking forward to guide you through the rest of the process very soon. So I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace out.